Hi, this is KYLA CLAPHAM, your host for Combat Boots to High Heels on Society Bites Radio, part of the Radio Air Network family. The past few episodes, we have been discussing a few things that are important in the transgender community with being treated as human, having protection laws and protection policies in place, having healthcare and insurance that is inclusive and being able to cover needs that we have, as well as needs from our former lives until those things can get taken care of. Uh, that is a big thing, and we'll be discussing those issues, revisiting them with other guests, and getting their take on things as well. So you just don't have my opinion on it or my viewpoints. You'll be able to get other viewpoints on that as well. And we're going to work on getting lawmakers involved with podcasts, interviews. We're going to work on getting insurance company interviews, both healthcare and life insurance, to see where we can come up with something that everybody can be happy with in the future and moving for a more inclusive society. So, for this episode today, I want to dive into a little bit of background about me and my family and what we're going through. Um, and how I rediscovered who I was during this journey and how that has brought forth a healing process that I didn't experience before. So I grew up in East Central Illinois in a at the time was a small town atmosphere. A lot of people knew everybody. You know, you got in trouble with the cops. You were lucky if the cop didn't turn you over their knee before they got your parents. Type situation. If the cop knew you, if the cop didn't know you, then it was a little bit worse because your parents got a hold of you 100%. Um, you could have somebody down the road that had a barn with a donkey or a horse in their backyard before it became against policy, city ordinance to have farm animals in, but they were grandfathered until that animal passed away. Once that animal passed away, they could not bring a new one in because there was they kept a census on that information, as it were. With growing up, I remember having my own little makeup kit, and it was made with up of those little samples from Avon of the lipsticks, the blushes, the eyeshadows, everything that they would try to sell people because my grandmother always bought from Avon when she could. And so they always gave those samples out back in the day. And I had those in a little Tupperware container that I would sit out in the front yard and put makeup on. I had a couple things from her closet and uh, something else from my mother's closet that I like to dress up in and play in. And then one day, I and my mom started dating, and this particular gentleman that she married, my stepfather, and all that came crashing down. I wasn't able to do what I wanted to do. I was told that in order to put on makeup, it could only be Halloween and it could only be monster makeup. It could not be that feminine style makeup that I was used to playing with and doing and living life. And I guess at that point in time is when something switched off because they got me in Cub Scouts. They had me, I mean, beforehand I was in Indian Guides with my uncle, then my stepfather, and then that happened. I was moved into Cub Scouts, moved over from there into Weeblos. Mom was involved as one of the den mothers. My stepfather was the pack leader at one point in time. I did all that stuff that was expected of me that they were programming me to do. And I still loved to cook during that time. My grandmother and mother, when my mother was still single, they had to teach me how to cook because there was a couple times they thought I was going to burn the house down. And so they started teaching me how to cook, which is never a skill that should go untaught. Kids need to know how to cook. Trust me. When you come into the house and it's full of smoke because there's a pot on the stove and a hot dog in it that's nothing but a charred stick, you know something's wrong because there was a step missed. Or if the cast iron skillet's on the stove and it's going and an egg's dropped in there and you come back and it's a charred puck and there's smoke all over, obvious signs that that kid wants to learn how to cook. Um, and it's better that teach them how to cook and how to cook properly so they don't burn water while they're trying to cook macaroni and cheese. Nothing worse than scorched water, let me tell you. A little comedy in there, I know, but we always teased one of my sisters that she could burn water and there would still be water in the pan. And especially when she went to get married. God love her. I love my sisters. I did from Boy Scouts, from Cub Scouts and Webelos, went into Boy Scouts. Um, was not always into everything that they all did, but I tried. I tried my best. From an early age, my cousin, who was 5 years older than me, started grooming me into that military state of mind when she got in high school because she was in ROTC. She needed to practice for things, so she started teaching me. From ROTC in high school, well, my freshman year of high school, I was not in ROTC. I went to a private Christian holiness school because I decided to rebel against my mother and stepfather. And I needed to get away because there was turmoil, havoc, and everything else in the house. And my teenage years were not the greatest for that. So at that point in time, I was not in scouting anymore. I did not join a scout group in Indiana. I then was just there, went through school, rebelled, like I said. I ended up failing 2 classes. Not that I'm proud of that because I had to repeat those, of course, because they were core classes for graduation. But I was also invited not to reapply for school because I was more liberal than they were in this conservative school situation because it was considered a holiness school. And while I was not as holy this model as them. We did have one gentleman in school that was a senior that later in life I found out he was homosexual. I'm like, it's really not a surprise. From one time, one weekend when I went to his house, he didn't try anything on me, but it was just one of those experiences. He had some magazines. Um, Never saw anything like that before. As far as the male goes, I saw Playboys at an early age in grade school because they were on the store shelf. You could go in, pull it up, take a look at it. One of my friends introduced them to me around junior high-ish, maybe fifth grade, first year of fifth grade. I did repeat fifth grade twice because of issues with the teacher. So back then, you could go into the store. Nothing was blocked off from kids or anything like that. Later on, when I got into high school, they had to go behind the counter, all that fun jazz that to protect the youth of society. Because of the big movements against pornography, against those industries, and living life that way. I could go to the store and buy cigarettes for my grandmother. There was no problem with that, or for my uncle and aunt, up until probably my 6th grade year when you had to 7th grade, when you had to start having a note from that parent to purchase them. And then finally they came out, nope, you can't unless you're 18, period. So that's that part of life. I am an ex-smoker. I ended up um, smoking at an early age, which I'm not proud of, but it does happen, I guess. And when you grow up with a lot of smokers in your life, things can happen, and things do happen in those retrospects because that's the culture you're in. Culture plays a lot in our upbringing and how we perceive things and how we do things. My real father was not always in the picture. I saw him a while, then my mother got remarried, and then I didn't see him for quite a while again. At one point in time, I did ask to be adopted by my stepfather. Then the turmoil started with my stepfather while my father was thinking about it. When my father came back to give his permission, I said it's not going to happen. Too many fights with my stepfather to move to having my stepfather's last name. And that wrapped up that little bit in my life. There's a little bit more to it that you'll see in my memoirs that I'm writing, but um, only tidbits that you're going to get as teasers. When that comes out, you'll be able to read more about me and my life, along with not being invited back to the Christian Holiness School, which in retrospect was probably one of the best things that could ever happen to me. From there, I went to public school, my hometown, and my sophomore, junior, and senior year. Spent that in ROTC. But because I got held back the 1 year in fifth grade, I was in a real different category of being a student. So there was things I had to be careful with in school, so I didn't get suspended or expelled, and I tried to keep my nose clean as much as possible. With being an ROTC, that led to thinking about the military. And one day, the National Guard recruiter for the Illinois Army National Guard in my hometown came and talked to us in our ROTC classes. And Sergeant Comstock was a pretty charismatic person. He portrayed the way the National Guard was and what they could do for us. And I'm thinking, well, I do want to go to college. That is a nice way to kind of help my parents out. So I love my mom. And so I wanted to start college with the Montgomery GI Bill in the community college and pursue what I wanted to do with my life. So I signed up my junior year because I was old enough for the Illinois Army National Guard. My local unit was an infantry unit, and that was one of many jobs. The main job there, a few others, was supply or the working in the mess section. Well, I was cooking at the time out in the civilian world. I didn't really want to do that in the military as well. I worked supply for ROTC, didn't really want to do supply, but supply was my backup job if the infantry was full. Sounds weird, but yes, when you go into the military enlistment processing station, or MEPS as we call it, jobs can be full. So then you have to have a secondary job. Sometimes those secondary jobs are full, so you have to move into a tertiary job, tertiary. And you have to see what fits within your ASVAB testing score at the same time, which is an aptitude test that you take when you're joining the military. The infantry was open. That was the main thing. I'm like, yeah, let's go. Wanted to prove myself, went into signing up for the infantry. But I was able to do the split option delayed entry program because I was still in high school. I had to finish school, and being that that was my junior year, I was able to do the split option. So that put me in doing basic training first, the one summer, which I did. And when I got to Fort Benning, Georgia, my world changed. In a nutshell, it was not something I really expected. The drill sergeant said, "If anyone wants out, go up against the wall. This is your time." So